You're listening to the Run for Your Lives podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Daphne.
And I'm Pake.
And this is the Run for Your Lives podcast.
This episode is Love and Monsters, the 2020 American post-apocalyptic adventure film directed by Michael Matthews, released on October 16th, 2020. Oh my gosh, it's exciting actually for me to say that.
I know.
To be able to say that the movie was released in the same year, not just year, but same month that we're recording this.
I know. We have not had this happen yet. I was looking forward to this one because I knew it was going to give us an opportunity to talk about a movie that was new. We've been covering so many of the classic movies and then some that were, in all the different veins with the monster movies, creature features, disaster films, all of these different movies. But we really couldn't get super current because, of course, with everything going on, we aren't really able to get out to the movies. But this one dropped.
Yeah.
And we checked it out and decided it was perfect to cover. So here we are covering Love and Monsters.
I'm excited to get into this one, for sure.
I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this one, Pake.
Yeah.
I have a feeling it's one that you really enjoyed.
Your feelings would be correct.
All right.
But we'll talk about that a little more as to why, I'm sure. But yeah.
All right. That sounds great.
Cool.
Okay. So, giving a little behind the scenes, there was not a lot of information available about this film, but I did get a few tidbits here and there. So, as we mentioned, it was directed by Michael Matthews. It was filmed in Queensland, Australia. The screenplay was by Brian Duffield and Matthew Robinson. Originally, this movie was going to be titled Monster Problems. And then instead they changed it to Love and Monsters, which I like better.
I do. I like that better.
The budget for the film was about $30 million. The original release dates bounced around from March 2020 to April 2020, then to February 2021, before they finally decided to release it on video on demand on October 16th, 2020. It was also released in about 387 theaters, and as of October, the October 16 to 18 weekend, it had grossed approximately $360,000. In its debut weekend, Love and Monsters was the #1 most rented film on Fandango Now and Apple TV.
Cool.
And it clocks in at about 109 minutes.
Nice. I was thinking about it while watching the movie. I wondered what a full-scale, wide theater release of this movie would have been like, and how it would have been received, and things like that. And so it kind of makes me wonder, I guess one of the not really upsides, but silver lining to the whole coronavirus pandemic and quarantine and all this stuff is I think movie companies and productions are starting to realize that if done correctly, on-demand and at-home releases of movies might actually be better for a lot of different movies.
I agree. I'm wondering if they're going to take the data that they gather from this experience, this forced experience that we're in. I'm wondering if they will take the data and determine what might be more viable long term. So I guess we'll see with that.
Yeah.
Pake, why don't you give us a synopsis
All right.
of Love and Monsters?
In a monster-infested world, Joel learns his girlfriend is just 85 miles away. To make this dangerous journey, Joel discovers his inner hero.
Aww. That is very cute.
Yeah.
And I think it wraps everything up. It describes everything pretty well, I think.
Yeah.
For sure. There's so much to unpack with this movie, so we should probably just dive in.
Sure. Let's do that. First, what I want to get just kind of your initial overall thoughts of the movie itself.
Well, funny you should mention that. I think I can tell you.
All right.
For me, the movie had kind of a vibe from like the video game The Last of Us. Gave me a little bit of that, deteriorated world,
Yeah.
deconstructed environment where the grass and the earth is kind of taking over now that populations have been either killed or they've gone underground.
Yeah.
Different parts of it reminded me of a couple of other films like I Am Legend, A Boy and His Dog, Zombieland. I love that Joel grew throughout this movie.
Yeah.
The story of him being this terrified kid. And he was supposedly 16 when this happened and 23 at this point in time, which is 7 years later. But to me, he was still acting like a 16-year-old at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
He was still really scared and he froze. He really was just a scared, terrified kid. And seeing him grow from being that kid to what I consider to be potentially a leader, a colony leader.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed watching that whole trajectory from one point to the end. And
Definitely.
Overall, I thought it was a really solid film.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, yeah, mine's not really as succinct or well spoken. Just kind of my official thoughts. Like when I wrote down, I was just like, holy shit, I love this movie. That's all that I get from that. No, but for a lot of different reasons.
That's what I would expect from you, honestly.
Yeah, a lot of different reasons. It had really great like creature sequences. It was very emotionally driven, super heartfelt moments, but also had plenty of humor. I honestly thought it was damn near perfection as a film. That, like, in my opinion, the kind of movies I like. I mean, most people who know me know that my favorite movie of all time, hands down, is Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
Yes.
And so this movie carried a lot of the same. I mean, it's a very different movie thematically, like what it is, but kind of also not. Like it's somebody who's putting just blind love and affection towards somebody ahead of their own, safety, and going through hell and fighting whatever they have to get to that, only to kind of, as cheesy as it sounds, land at the end realizing that the person that they really needed to learn to love the most was themselves. Like, that's what,
that is very true.
I love that. And then balancing, the action with the humor, with the like nerdy pop cultureness, not necessarily video games and music like Scott Pilgrim does, but this one with like, it's more for the viewer, but having all the monsters and the details like that. And so it was a gamble covering a movie that neither of us had ever seen that had just come out, but I think that gamble really paid off. And I'm glad that this movie is in my life.
Yeah, we decided to cover this film without having seen it and determined that we would actually, talk about it on the podcast. We put it in to the schedule. Neither of us had seen it. We didn't know really how it would fit into the Run for Your Lives universe. But I have to say, after watching it, it fits perfectly, I think, in amongst the movies that we cover. It's a little bit different, but I think we can embrace that. I like that it's not a cookie cutter movie. Yeah. Like some other monster movies. Yeah. And I have lots of notes on the monsters.
Me too. Yeah. I wasn't sure because I didn't go into this thinking I was going to love it this much, because based on just the trailers and stuff that I had seen, promotional stuff, I was like not actually expecting a lot from this movie. I was kind of like, oh, it's going to be real cheesy and they're going to play with the gore too much. And it's all just a cheesy love story and whatever. Like I was not, looking at Dylan O'Brien being the lead, which, I know a lot of people are big fans like the Maze Runner series and stuff that he did. And I know it's very young adult, but I haven't watched them. I'll go ahead and be on that, go on that limb and say, I haven't watched them, but I've heard, that it is a lot more adult than I think it would be. It's not like Twilight or something.
It's not. I've seen at least two of them.
So he has an action background and stuff. But when I think Dylan O'Brien, because that's really what he's known for, and I haven't gone down that road, I'm thinking, teen hunk boy, kind of icon, like teen boy icon. That's what I think of when I think of him, even though it's not really the case. But that's just, I go that route because he's kind of in that realm in my mind. I don't know. So I wasn't sure what to expect, but I was very, very pleasantly surprised.
Well, he was in Teen Wolf also.
Uh-huh.
He had a role on that show. So I guess you're kind of correct.
Yeah.
But I think that he did a fantastic job playing Joel.
Yeah, definitely.
So we should just dive in. I feel like we're ready.
All right. Well, then I think, we like to talk about a lot of characters and stuff first. But I think I would want to start with not necessarily a specific character, but it's in the title of the movie. So why don't we go ahead and break down the monsters that make up Love and Monsters?
I'm always down to talk about monsters.
Yeah.
I'm always down. Oh my God. When the first monster that we really see, I mean, it's alluded to, we see things in the distance, but the first one that we see up close and personal is one of my least favorite animals, or amphibians, I guess, ever.
Yeah.
And we see these multiple eyes coming out of the water, and I'm like, oh, what is this? And then it climbs out, and I'm just like, no, thank you. I do not like frogs. Yeah. And I just was like, Joel, get the heck out of there. You've got to get away from that thing. I believe that's when we also meet the dog.
Yes.
That kind of helps him escape.
Yeah. Which we'll talk about. Before this, because I think it's an interesting setup, because I'm thinking, monsters, like what, this monster apocalypse that happened, like where did all these creatures come from? Were they, at first I thought, like an alien thing, but then it really turns out that it was just mutated bugs and creatures and animals that are already here on Earth. So I thought that was really interesting, that it was just kind of all the monsters, but it's all like mutated like animals that we already know. And so that's really cool. But it only seemed to affect like certain ones. Like it's like the
cold-blooded.
The insects and the amphibians and the reptiles and stuff like that. So
yeah, it was any cold-blooded.
Cold-blooded, yeah.
Yeah.
So of course, like most of your mammals and everything are all totally fine. But
yes. Yeah,
but I thought that was cool. And then you kind of see, first one we really see is the ant in the underground bunker. That was
I tried to block that out.
Actually pretty scary. They started off really strong. But then, the first one that he has like a real interaction with, where he isn't just frozen completely in fear and somebody else has to take care of it for him, is the frog.
Oh, and the look on his face, he was so scared. I mean, that was totally believable. And yet I questioned why he felt he needed to go out there. I mean, he knows that he freezes. Yeah. So it's like, really, you're going to go out there and then it's going to make someone else have to go out there and protect you because you can't do it yourself. And this is where we really get to see Joel at the beginning, at his lowest. Yeah. Someone who needs other people to take care of him. Mm-hmm. Like I said earlier, I feel like he was still 16 in a 23-year-old's body. Yeah.
I think, it was very naive of him to go out on this mission just expecting to kind of take Ray, is the guy that was back there in his colony, that advice of just don't fight, just run and hide. And he was very like, oh yeah, that's easy. I can do that.
No. No, he definitely can't.
I did notice, I noticed a lot of spider webs and webbing and everything when he first went out. And I was waiting this whole movie for a giant spider and it didn't happen. So I'm a little disappointed in that. Aww. But maybe we'll tee that up for a sequel. Wink, wink, hint.
I think Pake wants a sequel.
I want a sequel so bad. That's one of the things like I will talk about at the ending, but I'm going to throw it out now because,
It's funny because I kept trying to figure out what some of these monsters were because they came up with all these different names for them. Yeah. And so the names that I have written down, some of them I just don't know. Mm-hmm. Like a chumbler.
Yeah, I don't know.
They kept talking about a chumbler following Joel, and they're very slow, but once they get your scent, they follow you wherever you go.
Yeah, I was like, that's a forever lurking problem, like quite literally, just lurking after you. Which so I figured that was going to be like something that really came into play at the end also. And they kind of dodged that as well and didn't. Which is, again, like, I would be disappointed in these things, except I'm going to hold out hope that we will get to play them off in a sequel later down the road, maybe. I don't know. I hope so.
I think they set it up perfectly well.
Yeah.
I hope they don't look at the box office numbers as like the ultimate reason why they should do or not do a sequel.
Yeah.
Because we're just in weird times.
Yeah, box office doesn't mean anything as much as, like you said, these like online rental and download and streaming numbers are, which sound like they're doing really well for it.
Yeah. And the movie itself, when I looked it up, Rotten Tomatoes, it has really high numbers on Rotten Tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
So that usually bodes well. So people should check this movie out. I mean, obviously we think that, but we'll remind you at the end as well.
Definitely.
And then Joel falls into the sand gobbler.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was called. The sand gobbler hole, which looked terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still not 100% sure what a sand gobbler is.
Yeah.
Even though we kind of saw the queen.
Just kind of these worms.
That's a very Tremors.
Oh, yeah.
vibe.
Oh, yeah. I have down here in my notes, I said when the queen sand gobbler appeared, I said, now the movie has become Tremors.
I feel like it shifted back and forth between different movies. I'm totally okay with it.
Uh-huh.
Because a lot of the movies that I felt like it was heading in that direction, it's like, oh, these are all movies I like anyway. So, okay, take me on this ride. My seatbelt is buckled. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Another one that I had was Limb Crusher, which we never saw, but I believe Minnow referenced it.
Yeah, she had this whole list. She's like, limb crushers, limb snappers.
It's like, oh my gosh, what are all these things? I really wanted to dive in.
Mm-hmm.
And there really wasn't any information available, but I wanted to know more.
Mm-hmm. They set up quite a whole universe for us, and
yes,
I love just even if they don't pay it off and go, there's like, but it's a rich monster world that they've painted, and so it is really cool that they've put in a lot of thought about even the stuff that we don't see or hear.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, loved it.
But the stuff that we did see is really cool because it's not only this world of terrifying mutant monsters that are all trying to kill you, is there also are a slew of them that are friends, as he writes down in the book.
Yes.
You know, the first one that we see that way is the boulder snail, is what they refer to it as. Which they were still very scared of it, because I love how Clyde's line of like, it's a nice one. He's like, but it will crush your ass, as he says, you know.
Yes.
It's still something to be very, you know, not worried about, but careful around. Yeah,
you have to look in their eyes. I think that's what Minnow said.
Yeah.
She was a very smart little 8-year-old girl.
Oh, yeah.
We'll talk about her later.
Yeah, I did like the you know, it kind of is going into the characters a little bit, but it also plays a good part with the boulder snail itself. Is, you know, Clyde knew very quickly, take your shirt off, and then he kind of put the shirt in the snail, like in the shell, and then sent it. It's on its way, and that was a really smart move, because then it spreads his scent in different directions, and then the Chumbler kind of loses track of them, which was very smart.
Yeah, it definitely was. The other thing too that was really cool is the sky jellies.
Oh, I love
they
the
lit
sky
up.
jellies.
Those were so
much.
Cool.
And that whole scene that surrounds them, we'll talk about later on. But
oh my gosh.
But yeah, but the sky jellies were really cool, and those were all their other ones that were friendly.
Yeah. The others were not so much. Although there was one at the end, which we'll talk about. Yeah. But I feel like we can't really talk about that till we talk about the giant centipede.
God, that was easily the most tense scene of this whole movie for me, was the centipede.
I was so worried. I'm like, Joel, if you let anything happen to Boy, you had better step up. And that was kind of the first moment that I really saw him step up, and he started to snap out of this, which we'll also talk about. Because we got some flashbacks during that scene that kind of helped shape why he was the way that he was.
Yeah, because he was,
I guess, at that time.
Yeah, I mean, since we're talking about the centipede, we talk about that scene. Yeah, because as he's kind of dealing with the centipedes, slithering, almost snake-like in a way. But yeah, it's very surrounding Boy, which is the name of the dog. And kind of, the dog can't escape. And then he's, it's intermingling with these flashbacks of him watching his parents killed in front of him by whatever giant bug that crushed their car.
Gosh.
And so we see why he feels like he isn't able to act or be useful. But then he kind of gets to this point where he's always relied on other people to save a situation. And then it kind of clicks in his head, like it is just him and the dog out here. And it's up to him. And I love that. It's the first time, we see him really muster up that courage and takes that thing out.
He does.
Only with 2 crossbows, 2 bolts.
Let's talk about just how that centipede came out of hiding. Like all these little legs.
Oh, man. It was like this small, high-pitched sound that it was making that was driving the dog crazy.
The dog knew. That dog was smart.
Yeah. And then, all the little legs coming up from the ground and then it rising. That was really cool effect. And then, like, the sound is louder now that it's not muffled under the dirt. And then you can see, because it's almost like an echolocation kind of thing, because it was blind, is what they had kind of hinted to. And then whenever it stood up and it flared out or whatever, and the sound stopped and things got quiet for a second. And it was really, really creepy. And then it started using its feelers, a little antenna, and started feeling around on the crossbow and on him. And then once it kind of pinpointed what he was in his form, then it just smacked him out of the way because the dog was barking and it wanted to go after the dog hiding under the duck.
Oh, under the duck. Yeah. And the way, though, that it coiled around that duck, it really was very snake-like.
Yeah.
And that was a very creepy thing. And I'm not usually terrified or scared or bothered by centipedes, millipedes, whatever. I'm just kind of like, whatever. This one was freaking crazy.
Yeah.
And I did not want anything to do with it. And I was so worried about the dog. And luckily, Joel stood up and took care of it.
Yeah.
So I was very relieved. And I started to believe that, okay, he's moving in a good direction. I feel like he's going to have an arc in this story that is going to really be beyond just a journey. It's really going to be more than that. So I was excited.
Yep. And I kind of noticed is that as he encounters the next monster that is bigger and scarier and more of a threat than the last one, that's when you get to see that arc move forward even more, that he encounters more growth at the same time. Because the next big one that we see from there is the queen sand gobbler, which, again, like we mentioned, it became very Tremors because it was the same thing where it was this underground worm that just could hear movement and sounds above the ground. And the fin was a nice touch. That was new. I like the...
Yes. That fin reminded me of another movie that we may or may not be talking about very soon on this podcast. Yeah. And again, poor dog. Poor boy. Just the red dress. And was freaking out. We still don't know the story of why he was so focused on that, but that's a great idea for a sequel.
There you go.
Let's find out.
Yeah.
And then you know what comes after.
Yeah.
Those awful leeches.
Oh, the super leeches. I kind of called them because they're very gross. Yeah.
Psychedelic leeches that take you on a hallucination trip. One, when he's peeling them off, and then he shows you the face, like the head of one of them, and I'm just like,
yeah.
Oh, no, I don't need to see that, because any other movie that I've seen leeches in, or that they portray leeches stuck, you pull them off and there's like a little bit of blood, and this was just like this spit and weird, like textured goo.
Yeah, they were disgusting.
And then he was seeing, the ferns talk to him, and then you knew you were in trouble.
Which kind of was helpful though, because it was in Clyde's voice, and it was him remembering Clyde telling him that those plants had medicinal effects to counteract poison and toxins, like the one that he had just been injected with all these leeches.
Yes. I was very happy to see that he was retaining some of the things that he learned from Clyde and Minnow, because they did teach him quite a few things.
They did.
Some of the things are not things that we actually saw them teaching.
Yeah.
So it was cool. I liked Clyde had his little list of rules.
Yeah.
And then we come to the giant 10-ton crab.
That was so cool.
I loved it.
I thought it was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk maybe about them a little more as well later, but the captain of this yacht crew.
Oh, Cap, yeah.
Has basically what is just like a shock collar on this thing. Mm-hmm. This electrified chain from the ship, and then he's got this like button that can control that, to where he kind of has control over this crab, where if it's coming towards him, he shocks it and it's like scared of him. It's like this, effect that he has on it, to where he can point it in different directions. And we find out it's also another one of these friendly, nice monsters, nice creatures, that the only reason it's destroying things and killing people is out of just like rage from it being shocked over and over, and it's just lashing out. It does take out the crew at the end, at their end.
I was quite happy about that.
Just as a revenge thing. Kind of like the boulder snail, you think, where it's like, yeah, they're nice, but like also don't piss it off. Don't.
Of course not. No.
It's capable of doing some damage if it wants to. It's just usually it doesn't want to unless you give it a reason to. And I think torture through being shocked over and over again by somebody, there's plenty enough reason to finally take them out when you get a chance.
I'm so glad I was clapping at the time. It's like, yes, take them out. They are awful. They need to go. They're obviously in that ship had been going up and down the coast, and that poor crab. I mean, I remember as a kid, because my dad's a lobster fisherman, or he was a lobster fisherman, he would bring lobsters and crabs home. And so I've seen crabs up close, live crabs, like regular size. Not nearly like the size of this one. But I've seen them, so it was interesting to see them, use a crab as, a way to keep the ship going. And then, like you said, the shocking. But then Joel looks in the crab's eyes and sees, and he hears, in his head, I think it was Minnow saying, "You got to look in their eyes.
You can always tell by the eyes."
And he could tell. And so he knew all he had to do was just end the crab's suffering. And then they would be okay. And so he did. And then, bye, boat. Which didn't look like a very good boat anyway. So I was glad it was, take them all out. That was fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else on the monsters?
No, I think we've covered everything.
Yeah, pretty much everything. Only other thing that we kind of jumped over-ish was, again, with the Queen Sand Gobbler, just that scene of him blowing it up with the grenade was really fun. I thought that was just incredible.
He pulls the pin out, and then he drops the grenade or something. He's trying to count in his 1, 2. He's all confused, and then he just happens to throw it at the right place at the right time, getting it where it needed to go, and then boom, it was over. Reminds me of Tremors.
Yeah.
When they kill the first graboid.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only other thing that, not the monsters itself, but some of the sound, audio, and the visual of a lot of things. I loved the monster sound effects. All those like little clicks and grumbles and stuff was really intense. It was a good like fear-inducing sound. They did really well with that.
Absolutely.
And then even like the visuals where you didn't even see monsters necessarily, but when they would give these wide panned out shots of the scenery and landscapes, and just everything is covered in hives and like nests and all these little things where just like the bugs have taken over the world.
They have. I liked it too. It reminded me, I think I said earlier, of The Last of Us, especially the second game, because everything was overgrown with vegetation. And there was a great shot of an old amusement park. You see like Ferris wheel covered in grass, covered in like vegetation. The same thing with the roller coaster. And then near the end, all these windmills just completely covered.
Yeah.
And it was just so overgrown and so distressed, I guess.
Yeah.
It was just really, down to the basics where nature was taking over.
Yep.
Because man was not there to do the upkeep. The bugs were not down to do the upkeep, so...
No. Yeah, it was cool. All right, so that's all we have to talk about really with the monsters. Then I guess we can get into the love part. No,
no, you want to go there?
Yeah, but no, but like the characters, the other like human and non-human characters themselves. But I guess we have to start with, and it's funny you make the connections to Last of Us, because then also we get another main character here named Joel.
I know. I thought of that too when I was writing my notes. It's like, oh gosh, I'm really connecting, but that connection,
yeah,
can't help it.
And we've scattered a little bit of commentary about him in the last little bit about the monsters, but to cover that really well, yeah, we see him at the beginning he's almost just the errand boy of the group.
Mm-hmm.
Not errands as far as running out and doing runs and supply stuff, because they don't trust him with that, but he's just the inside the bunker. He's really good at making minestrone and fixing the radio, and
yes,
that's it. I love how, he gives that line of just like, why do you need me here? You fix the radio, you make minestrone. Sounded a lot better in my head. Dad, that's all I got. Like, he's like, that's
I feel like Joel at the beginning didn't really know his place. I mean, he kind of knew that he was like the cook and he fixed the radio, but I think he thought that was all he was to the folks that lived there.
Mm-hmm.
And as the movie goes on, and at the end when he realizes that his colony was his family.
Yeah, that they actually did really love him and care for him.
Yeah, and so his place was bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he wasn't just Joel the minestrone cook.
Mm-hmm.
Minestrone cook. He wasn't just Joel the minestrone cook.
Mm-hmm.
He was Joel, the family member, the friend. And he needed to come to terms with that. And I think he really didn't know. He needed this adventure, one, to grow up, but also to learn more about himself. He was out in the big bad world, but he also was doing so much internal soul searching at the same time that I think you mentioned it earlier. The trip itself wasn't really the story. It was what he was learning about himself during this little trek across 85 miles of madness.
Yeah. Yeah, and his big problem, because he wants to go out and he wants to help on the runs and he wants to help take care of the monsters, and it's very much, no, you freeze. And I wasn't sure, you get really scared, and they kind of hint to that. And then with the ant, we see that where he is completely useless in that situation at first. He does completely freeze up and isn't able to do anything. And so it is good to see over the course of this movie where he really overcomes that and finds that inner strength and inner bravery, and gets better at the crossbow too, because he just needs a little training.
Minnow helped him with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Minnow helped him.
At least his
with that.
art skills had improved in his time in the apocalypse, because I love the little flashback we get with him and Amy where he's drawn her and it's just terrible. But then they cut back to like the present, and he's actually drawing these monsters in very vivid detail in his book. It's like, well, hey, if there's one thing he's gotten better at, it's his art. So that's good.
Yes. I liked his little book that he was putting together where he was drawing pictures, writing notes.
The monsters,
everything he was learning.
Monster Apocalypse Survival Guide, I think is...
Yes, Volume 1.
Volume 1, and we see a Volume 2 at the end. He's been working on more. But... Yeah, it's really cool. But yeah, like I said, it sounds really cheesy, but finding his inner bravery and heroism is the main focus. It's him learning to love himself and not necessarily the love of Amy. It is the love of Amy that drives him at first, but by the end he realizes he needed to find his own purpose.
Absolutely.
Really cool. And now he's inspiring countless other people to do the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved his radio address at the end. I think that he was recording it too to leave it in places.
Yeah.
It reminded me of Fear the Walking Dead when they were doing all the tapes.
Yeah, because it seems like that. He's just kind of had it on like a loop where it could keep playing and people could tune in and hear his inspiring speech of trying to get out and take the world back. If anybody can survive out there for a week, if he can, anybody can.
Anybody can. Yeah. Yeah. I really liked Joel as a character. I liked learning more about him through a few flashbacks that we got, which was, we did see at the beginning of the movie, they showed us him and Amy, who were really getting close until, you know, shit went down and they couldn't continue. So to me, I think seeing him at the beginning, then 7 years later, and then he reconnects with Amy via the radio, and we're getting to see that. But then we also get the flashbacks to his family, and the first time they show you the flashback, it really just shows you Joel watching his parents die.
Yeah.
But then a little bit later, we saw a flashback that shows you the same scene, but it also shows you after that, when it looks like Ray and the others are in a truck and they rescue him right after it happens. So you realize that, okay, Joel didn't just happen upon these people. He's been with them since the beginning.
Yeah.
And so that connection, he does not realize that connection is as deep as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, throughout this movie, he continues on his quest to get to Amy, but I don't think he realizes throughout it that he is really, like we said, learning about himself. And I think that's what helps make, when he realizes that his colony is his family, this whole movie leads to that.
Yeah.
Every step that he takes, every single obstacle that he faces, it's all helping him grow. And now, like I said, I look at him like he could be a leader of a colony, because he doesn't have those same freezing fears that he had before.
Yeah.
He's able to step up and fight and take care of people.
Yeah.
And that means something to him.
He goes back all the way, 7 days journey again to kind of save his old colony, or at least go in and inspire them not to give up, and takes them back out. Says, yeah, okay, so this place is done for, but that's okay. I can survive out there. Let's get out there. I know of a place. Since he had managed to meet up with Minnow and Clyde, and so now he knows of kind of a goal of where they can go. And it's really cool. So, I mean, yeah, this journey not only really shows him who he is, but I mean, it ends up being maybe what saves a lot of the human race.
Absolutely. I like that he realized that there were things worth fighting for, and that being safe, it's okay. Even if you look at your situation, you think, okay, this isn't the best possible place. Well, there could be some place that's better.
Yeah.
And it's important to stay where you are until you find that place, or to just take a leap of faith and go for it. And I think that he definitely is that person that they can follow now. I don't think he was at the start, but I think he is that person now.
Yeah. All right. So I think that about covers Joel pretty well.
It does.
So I think we can kind of transition a little bit, maybe to the reason he leaves in the first place.
Oh, Amy.
Yeah. Who is Amy? I remember whenever he's like, the movie picks up and he's writing these letters. I was like, who's Amy? Like, where did he? And yeah, we find out pretty quick. Yeah, that he was, you know, his girlfriend. She was his girlfriend from before everything kind of went down. And then he has managed to track down every he's tried all the different bunkers that they have, and he's found her that she is alive and only 85 miles away over in Jenner Beach.
And that was hard to survive, because as we learn, I think it was Clyde was telling us that not many people survived from the community that he and Amy were from.
Yeah, in Fairfield.
Yes. So I think that was pretty incredible that they both survived. And that he was so persistent to continue to look for her throughout that time. And we learn that I feel like she has an extremely big heart. She is the youngest person living in the colony she's in.
She's kind of the leader.
She's the leader. Yeah. She's taking care of all of these people that are significantly older than her. And we learn that she did have someone special to her, which I think was really hard for Joel to hear, that she did have someone that was special to her, and that he had died. And I think that's kind of a catalyst for Joel actually thinking about what he needed to do for himself versus Amy or anyone else.
Yeah. And I kind of figured that was going to happen. As I was watching the movie, I figured he was going to make it there and realize that the feelings weren't necessarily mutual. Like, she still loved him, like, but not that way. And, it could have been really sad and a depressing point, but instead, I think it only strengthened both of their characters. To where, that 7 years is a lot of time and a lot of things can change. She's moved on. Joel was kind of part of that old life, but she was glad to have him and see him. But you can't blame her, be mad about that. Like, she has moved on, and, a lot has happened, and she's found who she is now, which is such a badass, by the way.
Oh my gosh, such a badass. I have to agree. Her trajectory was just different. She became leader of this community. She couldn't hide or freeze. She had life and death decisions to make to protect her people, and that was a different life than what Joel was having, where he was kind of sheltered in his colony, where he didn't have to do anything, or he couldn't do anything because everyone thought that he would freeze.
Yeah.
And so Amy had a completely different road. I liked her strength. Yeah. I like how she was putting the lives of her people ahead of everyone, including herself. And I think that she's a leader. And I hope that, we didn't see this necessarily, but I hope that when Joel saw her, that he realized that, okay, look at her. She's a badass. She's the leader. She's the person I need to be. I need to be like her. Yeah. I need to put everyone else first and not be thinking about what I need right now. It's got to be what the group needs.
Yeah. And man, the colony that they had built up was just amazing.
I loved it.
And I was like, why would you want to leave with these random people on this boat when you have all of this? Like, this is such a cool, which I guess, it did scare her, she said, when she found out that Joel's colony had been breached. And she was like, well, is anybody place really safe? And just unfortunately, she had bought the lie that she was being sold by Cap and his crew.
Yeah.
I think she would be smarter than that, but sometimes, like you said, when she's putting all of these older people around her first, she's more worried about their safety, and coming right off the fact of learning about this breach, that maybe she's going to be a little more quick to be worried about that and want to do something different.
Yeah, I think she was in a hurry. I think she looked at the situation and thought, we need to get out of here. We need to figure out what to do. Like, we can't stay here because it's not going to be safe.
Yeah.
But she really didn't know how the colony was set up at Joel's colony. So, I mean, they were all so, different.
Yeah.
I liked where hers was, though. They had a little beach. It was, it was cool.
Yeah.
I guess.
I would definitely want to be there with her versus the place that Joel was at when we first see him.
Buried down in a bunker. At first, I thought when he came out of there that his eyes were going to hurt, because God knows when the last time was that he saw the sun. So, yeah, I wasn't sure what was going to happen with that.
Yeah. Anything else there?
No, I think that we covered Amy pretty well. Oh, except that she was, actually, we did mention she's badass.
Yeah.
Yeah. When she fights Dana and Rocco and takes them out, major props. That was awesome.
Super cool. She just rips the door off of the big grill that they had out there and uses it as a shield and a battering ram at the same time.
She definitely wasn't taking any prisoners.
No. All right. Well, I think the next character we can move to is not a human, but is a boy. A good boy.
A good boy.
Very good boy. But yeah, Boy, the dog, which I
loved that dog.
Love this dog so much. I have in my notes kind of a little joke. I was like, I love this CGI dog. No, I said, but for real, he wasn't all the way. Just in a lot of the action scenes and stuff, they used a CGI kind of thing. But for real, yeah. Boy is played by two adorable little doggos named Hero and Dodge. And they use CGI for all the action sequences, but just kind of when they had dog interacting with a person or following Joel around, or then they had these dogs and they were awesome. And then in the movie, Boy, the dog, is just such an awesome dog. Very smart.
Yes.
Knows all these things. I'm sure learned a lot of this from his previous owner.
Which we don't know.
Woman who is with this red dress. But, he was trained to open and close the door on the bus with this string, and he knew, like, how to, like, if he sensed monsters and stuff, he would go and hide. He had these, he would bark a little bit, but, like, was very good at following orders and knowing when to be quiet and when to come here and when to, it was really cool. And he knows about, like, the what berries and stuff you can or can't eat.
He's so smart.
Sure, he's learned for a lot of this from his previous owner, which I wondered about the berries thing. I was like, maybe that's what killed his previous owner, so he knows why those are a problem. I don't know, but
I'm not sure. It just
we don't get much.
We never saw anything other than the neat little things in the bus. Like if you lay down on the bed and you look up, it's got the girl and the dog like up above, so you can see it when you're laying down.
Mm-hmm.
And the red dress.
Yeah.
That dog did not want anything to happen to that red dress. Let me tell you, that was important to him.
Yeah. Very. But yeah, I think the first time Joel really interacts with Boy is in the bus after he's been saved and has time to just kind of, I thought it was just so cute how he's sitting there and talking to him like he's expecting an actual like answer back and
conversation.
Oh, that's okay. We don't have to talk about that if you don't want to. He's very, but he hasn't, I say like he hasn't had interactions. He has with all of these people that are in his colony, but like he even felt like the odd one out himself that whole time he's in there.
He did, because they were all pairing off.
Mm-hmm. So just to have someone that he could have like personal time to talk to, even though it's a dog, it meant a lot to him.
He was telling Boy how he was going to find Amy and that he hadn't seen her for 7 years. He was nervous and the type of thing that you would talk to your friends about. If you were going on a date or you were going to see someone, you would talk to them about it.
Yeah.
And so he was talking to the dog about it.
But this dog was so cool and so precious. I wrote down in my notes here, I was just like, said, I love this dog more than anything. And if anything happens to him, I'm going to burn down something. I don't know yet, but I'll find something to burn and I will.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of animals getting hurt in movies. And so when the centipede was wrapping around the duck, all I could think is, if you do something to this dog, I have to turn this movie off. I will not be able to watch the rest of it.
I was like, I can't recommend this movie to anybody now if that happens. So you're going to have to let the dog live.
The dog has to live. Oh, yeah. But then Joel gets mad at Boy and yells at him because of the red dress, because it runs off from, I think it was a tree trunk where they were hiding from the queen monster.
Yeah.
And then dog runs and gets the dress and goes across the river, or somehow doesn't get any leeches on him. I don't know how that happened, but good job, dog. You must know something. But Joel did not know. And then he yells at Boy and just is angry because he ended up in the water and all of the things that happened, and he didn't want to be in the water, and he ended up with leeches. He was just so angry. And Boy runs off, and I think, no, what's going to happen? Are we ever going to know what happens to Boy? Like, I need to know.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. It says a lot about his loyalty, though. Even though he ran off there, he still followed Joel, even from a distance, and knew where he was going, and was able to swoop in and save him again at the last minute.
Of course. Ugh, love that dog.
I got so excited when I saw him.
It made everything come full circle. I'm like, oh, this is tying up nicely, but we can still have a sequel.
Yeah. The only other person that Boy has some connection to, really, other than Joel, is Minnow.
Yes.
And I thought that was adorable also. But then it was really kind of a sad moment when they part ways. And Boy's kind of stuck there in the middle, and he's whimpering, and he knows he's got to go with Joel, but he doesn't want to leave Minnow and Clyde.
No.
Like
No. I think he knew that they were good people.
Yeah.
And that Joel probably should stay with them. But I think he also knew Joel was not going to stay with them.
Yeah.
That dog understood a lot more than I think, well, we think it did.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, absolutely. So we might as well talk about Clyde and Minnow.
Absolutely. I loved them a lot, even though we didn't get to see a lot of them. I'm glad we had them, because I knew Michael Rooker. It was in this movie, and I figured that he wasn't going to be a huge role. And so I was more scared that his character was going to die. And so I'm glad they didn't do that, because we get a chance to see maybe more of them. Again, I'm throwing it out into the universe that there's going to be a sequel, and I'm just going to hope that it happens. It's positive thinking here. I'm just going to keep throwing it out there.
Of course.
But yeah, I love seeing Michael Rooker always. I love that man so much. He's crazy. He's so wild, but he's very fun. And I mean, like, not just in his movies and characters, but even in real life, I've managed to see him a lot at different conventions, and I've watched a lot of his panels and stuff. And he's just always, he's something else for sure.
He has his own vibe.
Yeah, but his
own vibe.
Incredible just personality comes through in all of the roles that he plays in any movie he's in, and it shines through Clyde as well.
Definitely. When they were introduced, I, like you, was nervous right away, thinking, oh no, something's going to happen to Clyde. And then Joel's going to have to take care of Minnow, and I don't think he's ready for that.
No.
Something's going to happen. But then, surprisingly, he did not die.
Yeah. And
Clyde taught so much to Joel.
Yeah.
And Minnow did as well. Like, that 8-year-old, she's sassy. And she totally, was ripping on him for the way that he was shooting the crossbow, for just about everything. Like, oh my goodness, Amy's not going to want to have anything to do with you. She's not going to want to be with you. And just was ripping on him the entire time about whatever she saw at the time that was funny.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
But it was like endearment. Like, Clyde even points it out. Is like, she's giving you a hard time because she likes you.
Yes.
And we really come to see that is, when he finally shoots that tree perfectly, and he's like, yeah, you did it. Because Minnow had spent this time training him, and she just gives him this big hug. And immediately you realize there's actually she's really connected to Joel. And
yes.
And she cried and just did not want him to go when it was time for them to separate.
Yeah.
And
that was sad.
Yeah.
I know, I didn't want them to split up either. I'm like, can't you just go with Joel for a little while longer? But they weren't going to the same place.
Yeah.
And, it's all that really could happen.
Yep. So they do end up having to separate, but it's a really good thing that they had met, because Joel definitely needed the stuff he learned from them to make it to Amy. He wouldn't have without it, I don't think.
No, he definitely would not have. There's no way.
Yeah.
It's just not possible. Yeah, I liked Clyde's lessons. We didn't get to learn all of them, but we did get to learn a few. I actually wrote some of them down.
Awesome.
Lesson 1, always survey from higher ground. Mm-hmm. Lesson 2, you get a hot meal or a good night's sleep. Not both.
Yeah, that was the... Loved it. That's the rule that he had the hardest time with. Not both.
Yeah.
Not both.
Yeah. Lesson 3, don't take shortcuts. Lesson 8, target practice every day. Lesson 10, keep your socks dry.
That's an important one.
Yes. And final lesson, listen to your instincts. They'll keep you alive. Mm-hmm. And those are the ones that we learned. And I'm hoping that in the future we will get to learn what number 4, 5, 6, and 7, and 9 are. Mm-hmm. Because those are missing, and until we know, that's just missing things on my list. And I got to have those filled in.
I just thought about this quote, even though it's not in my quotes, but so I'm going to say it now before we get there so I don't lose it. When you mentioned the instincts, trust your instincts, they'll help you survive. And he was like, well, what if my instincts are terrible? He says, well, then you'll die. Very matter-of-factly.
So matter-of-fact. Oh my gosh. Oh, I loved Clyde. He was great. It's funny because I read something online that Michael Rooker already wants a sequel to this movie. So,
oh yeah, I'm right there with him.
There's someone else pushing for it.
I'll stand right by his side and petition it with him.
I loved what Minnow said to Joel to help him shoot better by just saying to him, it's like a needle through water. It was something her father had said to her.
Yeah.
Shoot like it's a needle going through water. And that's also when we learn that Minnow's dad was a great archer, and he and Clyde's son, Elliot, died at the subway station.
Yeah.
Which I guess is someplace that they had all been holed up together.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of an interesting thought that we don't really get an answer to as to why Minnow and Clyde aren't part of a colony somewhere.
Yeah.
They've just kind of, they're out on their own, wandering around.
Yeah. I wondered that.
Maybe they're food stealers. Yeah. No.
I don't think that they're on the same road as Cap and Rocco and Dana.
Yeah. I did think that was funny, though, that kept coming up so many times after... Are you a food stealer? Oh, he's definitely a food stealer. No, I didn't. And then every time he meets up with somebody, it's like, oh, you're probably... It's like, I didn't do that. I was like, is this like the one unforgivable sin of the monster apocalypse is being a food stealer?
Yeah. Monster apocalypse. That is a great term right there. Mm-hmm. Those were, I believe, all of the notes that I had. Other than they did rescue Joel. How they meet Joel is they rescued him from the sand gobbler's nest. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I like how sand gobbler is now just part of my vocabulary. Like, it's just...
Yeah, those things, you know.
You know, those sand gobblers.
All right, yeah, that's all I had on them, too. So the only other, like, character notes I had is I had a few little things about Cap, Dana, and Rocco, the yacht crew. I did not trust them from the very beginning. I had good instincts. There.
You did.
I was like, for some reason, I was like, I don't trust him. He's full of shit. I don't know why, but there's something going on here.
They kept saying he brews his own beer or something.
Yeah.
Like that. And he was going to take them to a safer place or help them find a safer place. I'm like, I've seen that boat. That boat is not going to hold all those people.
Yeah. I don't know what they're...
No way. No. That's not going to happen.
And the way that they were set up at that colony, I was like, I don't think there's any safer place. Like, this looks like a great place to be.
It does. I feel like you can go underground if you need to, or you can go party on the beach if you want. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's pretty cool. So, yeah. Cap was very suave. I thought he's just had a habit of saying all the right things that need to be said.
Yeah.
Easing everyone's fear. He knew exactly what to do, you know. And Rocco, to me, was more like the muscle. Mm-hmm. And Dana was like the tough girl. Like, she knocked Joel out at one point because he was figuring things out.
Yeah.
Because of the story that Cap told about Lizard climbing.
Yeah.
And Joel remembered that he had learned from Clyde that the large lizards don't climb or shit. I believe that's what Clyde said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So then we find out what's going on with them is they're shady. They are the food stealers, the worst thing you could possibly be in the whole universe, apparently. Except, you know, beyond that, they're pirates. That's what they're doing.
Yes, they are.
They're
and
infiltrating.
Not from the Caribbean.
Yeah. They're going along and they're infiltrating different colonies, getting their trust, and then taking them out and stealing what they can and moving on to the next.
And probably letting the crab eat them. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many colonies have been wiped out because the big crab has eaten them because he's been shocked? Mm-hmm. Sad.
What was it? Cap's line? Again, it's another quote that I didn't write down, so I'm just trying to pull it from memory from after watching the movie. It says something about like his only justification for that is like, well, it's the apocalypse. Shit gets wild. You know, like it's crazy, isn't it? You know?
Yeah.
And that's...
Yeah, I didn't trust him from the beginning. Just looking at the boat, I'm like, this boat...
Yeah.
It looks shady. This is all shady.
Mm-hmm. So they were taken care of quite well, thanks to Joel's quick thinking, and it was good.
Yeah, I was really happy. I was cheering for that. They're the Dennis Nedry of this movie for me.
That's going to become a thing on this podcast. As the worst character that you love to hate is the Nedry of that movie. I love it.
I think it should, right? I mean, really?
That's great. Anything else on them you've got, or any other notes?
No, we have covered everything that was in my notes.
Cool. Only other things I had were just some like moments that I wanted to point out. necessarily. I said some of the funny little thoughts that I had first. Right at the beginning, I said the Statue of Liberty will never catch a break in any monster or disaster movie.
No.
Because when we're picking it, like the movie first starts and it's just the drawings of like things, like the first one you see is the Statue of Liberty like smashed in half, and I was like, never catch it a break.
Can we talk about how awesome the opening was, though, with all those drawings? That was really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
And then one like funny little thing I noticed again that I was like out of nowhere. I might be the only person who really thinks to even make a note about it, but I was just like, when we get a little flashback to right when him and Amy are separating and she drives off because she's got to go find her family. I was like, why is Joel's mom wanting to save this chandelier so badly? What is the deal with the chandelier? I thought that was funny.
Thank you. I don't understand. And then he gets out of the car.
And he still has it in his hand.
And he still has it.
It's got to be in that colony somewhere.
I expected it to come out at some point. Oh my gosh. No, I totally... Yes, I did make a mental note of that. I didn't understand why he was holding the chandelier.
But yeah.
It just didn't make sense. Why would you take it?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a very eccentric choice.
It is.
Yeah, the only other moments that I had that were really important to me are the very emotional ones. Because I'll be honest, I shed some tears watching this movie at a few points. There was some stuff that got me. The first one, which I didn't expect to hit me as hard as it did, is his transmission with Amy while he's still at the original colony cuts out. And then he kind of has this little talk. It's a little narration about, even after 7 years, people dying in his bunker, his colony, is still something that people don't get used to. And they've got this little shrine for people there. And I don't know why that one hit me a little bit. Like, I didn't cry on that one, but it was definitely one where I kind of had my hand on my chest a little bit like, oh no.
Yeah. Well, you realize how much they've lost.
Yeah.
And how important it is that you keep that humanity and you don't become cold to losing a family member. Because that's what they were, as a family.
Yeah.
And you don't want to become cold because you do start to lose who you are as a human when that happens.
Yep. And then the one that really got me the most, because I even have here in my notes, I said, okay, I'm crying for a fucking robot that lived for like 20 minutes. Like, seriously.
Oh, I know right where you're going with this.
With Mavis, with a 1 where you think the I would be. When you read it out, it's a 1, not an I. But that whole scene was just absolutely incredible. Mavis was awesome, and she was able to use that little bit of like power that she had left to connect Joel to Amy with 1 I and 2 E's.
Yes.
And let him talk to her, which then gave him the information that this captain was there and what was kind of going on. Gave him a reason to kind of... Yeah, it put a little more pep in his step to get there quicker, I think.
It did. At that time, I think he had like I wrote it down, 9.3 miles to go.
Yeah.
And Mavis with a 1, she shows him the picture.
That's where it hit me, was going into his, just by using his full name and where he was from, she was able to pull pictures of his parents and then kind of blew up the picture of his mom and let him just talk about what he would say to them.
Yes.
And that's where the waterworks started. It was very, very emotional for me. And yeah, I was saying, he got a chance to speak his feelings, which got me right in mine. And then, of course, would you like to hear a song? Or would you want me, And she plays Stand By Me, which I was singing along with and just kind of feeling all of the emotions in that moment. And then it just cuts out as she dies. And he even builds a little grave and everything for this robot, which was just very heartfelt. And this whole thing being kind of lit with, him moving her to where she can see outside and sit there in her last moments and watch all these sky jellies floating around. And yeah, it was really cool.
And then Boy brought her foot back.
Yeah.
All the little details. It was so heartwarming. I didn't expect it, but I think at that point I realized this movie was going to show things that the movie itself was just not what I expected.
There was something more special to this movie, yeah.
There was something more special, yeah. And that, I think, is wonderful. Yep. When you get surprised like that, when you're watching something, and like we talked about earlier, I actually was thinking, what if this movie is terrible and we shouldn't cover it for the podcast, but we're already going to cover it for the podcast? Like, just please be good.
Yeah.
Just please be good. And it was so much more than that. So.
Oh, yeah. That's like what I said at the beginning of this podcast, where we took a gamble on a brand new movie when neither of us had seen, and it ended up paying off, I think, because I found a new movie that I really, really love. So that's good.
Of course you did. And you know what's cool, too, is that will help us going in the future when we have opportunities like this to cover movies that are new. We won't be quite so, or I won't be quite so nervous about it.
Cool.
Because I'll feel more confident in our choices. So this was a great experiment that ended in such a fantastic way. And did you have any other moments that you wanted to point out?
Yeah, we already talked about it a little bit, but the other one that hit me emotionally was when Joel finds all the notes written to him on his map from all of the people back in his colony. And it's all just these like beautiful little, hope you come back soon, or I hope you find love there. I hope everything's good. And that's when you realize that like the people he left behind aren't just these people who look down on him, and he's not just this errand boy, but he really is part of that colony and that family. And like the reason that he felt useless because they wouldn't let him do anything wasn't because they thought he was useless, but because of who he was at that time. They really had his best interests at heart. And they didn't want him to die. So it's kind of,
There was even that picture of Gertie that someone drew. The Gertie the cow that he spent quite a great deal of time milking.
Yeah. So yeah, that one I loved a lot. And then realizing that even before all the stuff that went down with Cap and the yacht crew, he had already made his decision that he was going to go back to them anyway.
Yes. I was glad about that, because one of the things about this movie that was it wasn't a twist, but when you see the synopsis and you just look at it and you think, okay, this is going to be a love story. He's going to get to the end. He's going to get the girl. It's all going to be, whatever. This movie did not give me that. Yeah. It gave something much better.
Yep.
And it wasn't as predictable as it could have been. And I liked that he and she were both, whether they rekindled anything or not, which I do think they rekindled a little bit, because I think she saw him differently. By the end, I think she didn't see the weak Joel anymore. I think she saw a real, badass character. She saw him as mature and a fighter and strong. Yeah.
And we got a little replay of their conversation where when she was leaving him back with his parents, and she says, and he says, I'm going to find you. And she says, you better. And it got flipped at the end where, she says to him as he's taking off to go back to his colony, I'm going to find you. And he says, you better. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. But I like that they both were going in their own directions to do something bigger, and realizing that they may care deeply about each other, but right now they need to do this. Yeah. This is more important. And I liked that. I liked that they had the common sense, the heart, to realize that this was much bigger than them, and that they had to move forward with that.
Yeah. So I think that kind of wraps up most of our coverage then. The only thing is, again, I'll throw it out in the universe one more time and leave it at this, that I really, really, really hope we get a sequel, and maybe that could be focused around their journey into the mountains, something like that. Maybe we can get a couple of other little things answered. And maybe see some of the monsters that were in this monster apocalypse survival guide. We can maybe see them actualized a little more. Oh. As much as it would creep me out, I want to see a giant spider. I want to see it.
A giant mutated spider, because they're going to be mutated. They may have like 30 legs, and it could be quite scary.
We need more with a chumbler. I need to see what this thing is a little bit more.
Even if it's slow, we need to see it anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I did have a couple of production notes. We talked about a few things already, so I'll just run through these quickly.
Cool.
Michael Matthews, the director, has actually directed only 5 films, and this is only the second full-length feature film. His first couple of films were short films.
Nice.
Instead. So he's new. I liked that. We talked about Boy being played by Hero and Dodge. One cool thing, though, was that when they were doing the filming with the dogs, only Dylan O'Brien was allowed to interact with them. But if Ariana Greenblatt, who played Minnow, was working with them, Dylan O'Brien would have to like take the day off and not be on set because they were very particular about making sure that they got exactly what they wanted from the scenes with the dogs.
Yeah, they wanted the dogs to mainly be attached to him. Yeah.
Yes. Also, some of these folks in these movies, we've talked a little bit about Dylan O'Brien being in the Maze Runner series.
Yeah.
And we may have mentioned that Jessica Henwick played Colleen Wing.
I don't think we mentioned that on the podcast yet. I think it was before we started recording. We were talking about some stuff.
Okay.
So, yeah, because I was like, who is that again? I was like, I know she's familiar. And I was like, oh, that's my Colleen Wing from the like Netflix Marvel universe, the Luke Cage and Iron Fist and Defenders.
Yes.
Yeah.
She was also Nymeria Sand on Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
And she played a character called Jess in Star Wars The Force Awakens. And Ariana Greenblatt, who played Minnow, played a young Gamora in Avengers Infinity War.
Yeah. It's hard. I didn't recognize her without all the green, but that's cool. That's who that was.
She was also on a kids' season of Dancing with the Stars. I think she finished 4th.
Cool.
So she did really, really well. So, but we all know her from playing Gamora in Avengers. So, yeah, that's really all that I had for production notes. There's not a lot out there about this movie. And, you know, over time they may release more. Or if there's a sequel, we're not going to let that die, folks. It's going to continue.
Keep throwing that out there. It's going to happen, and we're going to cover it, and I'm going to watch it. I'm going to love it.
It will be added to Peg's ever-growing list of favorite movies.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So I guess let's move into some quotes.
Ooh, I got a couple.
You got some good ones. I always let you go first.
I know. You always bring the funny, but these are kind of interesting. So Joel has explained to Minnow and Clyde why he's out in the wild. And Clyde says, "Kid, did you ever hear of the term fool's errand?"
Mm-hmm.
And Joel says, "All right, so I'm a fool because I believe in true love?" And Clyde says, "No, you're a fool because you're out here alone. You don't know a thing about survival. You shoot for shit, yet you've got an attitude like you're some kind of noble warrior floating on the wings of love. It doesn't work like that." Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really like, yeah, that's telling it like it is, for sure. And just as I was reading those, all I could, you know, in my head, I'm hearing Michael Rooker say those things. So it's kind of funny. The other one I have is also a Clyde quote. And it's, I think we may have talked about this a little bit, but good instincts are earned by making mistakes. If you're lucky enough to survive a few mistakes, you're going to be okay out here. This might come in handy too. And he hands Joel a grenade.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So those are a couple that stood out to me. Yeah. What did you have on your list?
I have quite a list of just like little quips and stuff because that's where I like to come from.
I knew you would.
At the very beginning when it's all the opening drawings and stuff, and he's going through, you know, the different, you know, I had a friend who was killed by his goldfish. He loved that goldfish and the cat. And then, you know, and he's talking about the, you know, he's showing the cockroach. He's like, you know, we had to fight them. You know, used to be able to, you know, kill a cockroach with a shoe. Then you needed a gun. Then you needed a tank. And then the one that I had on there, the last line, he goes, "It helps if you stay in the tank, Bob."
Oh, boy.
Which is funny. Another one is, I wish I could have got the full lines, but it was hard for me to get everything. But kind of when they're first going out to take care of the ant that had infiltrated, and he's like, "No, I'll go with you." And then like his colony members were like, "No, you can't go because you're this and you're this and you're this and you're this." And his follow-up, he goes, "Okay, why did that speech feel so rehearsed?"
Because they knew what they had to say to keep you in the house, basically.
We get the flashback between him and Amy, and he shows her the drawing that he made of her, and the line, she goes, "Why do I have a beard?" I thought was really funny. It's shading. I did the shading. I have a lot of these from
shading.
Yeah, I have a lot of these from before he even left the bunker because there's a lot of funny stuff. Yeah, he says when he's kind of writing this last little note, and it's like his narration to Amy where he's getting stuff going. He's coming for her. He says, "I'm taking a radio. No, it doesn't have power, but I'm taking it anyway." Which ended up being very helpful for him. The one that's not funny, but as he's leaving, Ray says, "Don't fight, just run and hide," which is kind of not funny, but like for who he is like, yeah, don't even try. And then, yeah, Clyde's rule I have on here because I really love that. You either get a hot meal or a good night's sleep, not both.
Yep.
I love when he's on the radio with Amy, when it's connected to Mavis. And he says, I'm in a motel with a robot and a dog. And then while they're fighting the giant crab, or right before they're fighting it, when it comes on land and Amy says, I'm gonna go take care of them. I'm gonna go get Cap. And she says, you get the crab. And he goes, what? Which I love that she just assumes like, oh yeah, you can handle this now, right?
I don't know why she thought he was ready for that, but I'm totally down because I think he was ready and he needed to learn that himself.
Yeah.
So she just kicked him in the ass and said, go take care of the crab.
Yeah. So yeah, those were what I had.
Those were great. This was great. This movie, it definitely exceeded my expectations.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Which is great because I think we're at the rankings, right?
We are. I'm gonna let you go first before I have to dive into my my whole
novel.
Well, I'm having to face my own crisis of what's real and what's not in my life of rankings.
This podcast is real.
Yeah.
We're recording it, and you're going to have to give a ranking to a movie that we all know you want to give a really high ranking to, but you can't decide if you should give it a ranking, so you want me to go first.
Absolutely.
So then you will feel better or worse.
I know.
And you hope it's better. Because you have no idea what I'm going to give it for a ranking. Even though I've been pretty positive about it, I think that you really don't know what I'm going to give it.
I don't. I'm curious. Curious.
All right. So, I could take forever and list off all the things I liked or didn't like about the movie and drag this out so that you're squirming. But I'm not going to do that to you. So I really enjoyed this movie a lot. There were so many great things about it. It's one that I think I'll watch again as one of my go-tos for this can be on in the background because I know what happens and I can watch the specific pieces that I really love, but I can also do some other things, which there are not a lot of movies on that list. It's a very small list, although the list includes some really silly movies. Like Snakes on a Plane. However, I am excited that we got to cover a movie that is current.
Yeah.
I loved the story. I loved that it did not give me what I was expecting. It took a little bit of a twist on it, which was great. So at the end of the day, I can't give it as high as I give my JP because that has to have the highest.
Yeah.
But I will give it a 9.
Nice.
Does that feel better?
That's good.
And now what are you going to do, Pake?
All right. Okay, so here's what happened with me. Again, I think I might have mentioned, I know I mentioned to you before we were recording, maybe not on. That's the thing is we have a little conversation before we hit record.
We do.
And then I forget what we have said or haven't said.
Yes, me too.
On air or whatever. But
I know.
So with ranking, it is very hard to compare a brand new movie that you're experiencing for the very first time and really letting a lot of the stuff that you love about it impact you in that moment versus a movie that you've seen numerous times over some of these movies since I was a little kid,
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so it's really hard to kind of compare because it's two completely different things. Something you've been like sitting with and enjoying your whole life or something like it's going to be a lot bigger in the moment because you just experienced it. And so with that, as I know, because you mentioned like Jurassic Park, because I think like Jurassic Park or even like other movies we've covered recently, like Jaws or Twister, even in a way, are like inherently like better movies that have stood the test of time and are like in the zeitgeist of like human pop culture. They're very huge movies. I don't know if this movie necessarily like in the grand scheme of things stands up to a lot of those culturally. However, for me personally and my own like things that I like, I probably think it's a higher rated movie than like a lot of those in this moment where I've thought, even though it's not necessarily a better movie. And it's a lot of just like me talking in circles for no reason other to say like, And I think I did this with Jaws, where I was like, well, to make things line up, I was like, I realized that Jurassic Park being one of our earliest ones, I only gave it a 9, which is then also even with, I think, what I gave The Ritual and A Quiet Place, even though like Jurassic Park, even compared to those ones, should be way higher. So I'm like, maybe I just need to like say that Jurassic Park is actually more like a 9.8 and just like adjust my scale, you know?
For inflation?
Yeah, I have to adjust that scale.
Yes, we can do that, Pake.
Because now where I've landed on this movie is I think I'm giving it a 9.3 is the ranking that I landed on for this one.
All right.
Because I actually think
right?
I enjoyed it better than The Ritual, even in the grand scheme of things. I think going back on it, I'm like, if I have to pick between those two, I'd rather watch this one.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
That's not a question for me.
Yeah.
Though I appreciated The Ritual, the second time I watch it, this one is one, like I said, that I would go back to and watch again.
Yeah.
The Ritual I may never watch again.
Mm-hmm. Or like A Quiet Place, I really, really love and have seen it several times. And now I even have like personal ties to that movie in a way where I've enjoyed it a little more in other ways too. And so that's really high, but I'm like, I don't know if I'm looking for like a really fun movie to just really appreciate. This one might beat that, you know? So it's...
Yeah.
So I have to give it a little higher on that scale here, but then it puts it higher than Jurassic Park on the initial grade I gave that.
I know.
But that was a very early episode, so we're going to have to adjust. We learn as we go, and that's why I love saying every week that the rankings don't actually matter at all. Like I said, It's like whose line is it anyway? The scores are made up and the rankings don't matter.
Nope. We just go with it. It's just something fun to do. It makes us laugh when we do it most of the time. And yeah, at the end of the day, it seems to me that we found yet another movie that we both really enjoyed. Yeah,
like this may really very well be like on that list alongside like Scott Pilgrim and Shaun of the Dead and
oh my goodness,
Baby Driver, and like these like, which I realize that all three of those movies I just mentioned are Edgar Wright.
Yes,
like,
they are.
So I mean that's probably my favorite director of all time. Him or Taika Waititi comes up pretty close second, but those are the movies I love, which sadly none of those really fit here, except for maybe the Cornetto trilogy we might be able to play with a little bit.
We might be able to, because you know what?
I don't know. We'll see.
You know what, Pate? We make the rules.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We make the rules here at Run for Your Lives.
So this almost had, it didn't really have an Edgar Wright vibe to it. It is a very different thing. But in the ways, like the themes that I loved, it matched a lot of what his movies do for me. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great. I thought you were going to give it a 10, so a 9.3. Okay.
Yeah.
That works.
Yeah, I had to dock it a few points than it being like super, super high for the, of course, you know, the CGI wasn't bad, but like, of course, some of it's a little virtual, you know, and then like the dog, you could really tell, you know, I pointed that out that the action sequences with Boy were very CGI. And then, of course, some of our open-ended questions that we don't get any answers to, or certain things that they tease, and then I wanted to see that spider. I wanted to see the giant mutant spider, and I didn't. But
you know what? That gives them plenty for the sequel.
That's why I keep casting that out for the sequel. They can give it to us then.
You may hear this randomly on upcoming episodes as well. Remember, we need that sequel.
Yep. All right, now it's time to get into a little bit of feedback here, Daphne.
Wonderful.
We have a couple of comments and messages to read. So this first one comes from Shenandoah, and it's a movie recommendation, but you know what? Even you send us stuff like that, we'll read it and conversate with you over the podcast.
Absolutely.
No problem. And we'll message you. But she says, my favorite disaster film is 1974's The Towering Inferno, starring Paul Newman and Steve McQueen, also featuring Faye Dunaway, Richard Chamberlain, O.J. Simpson, and Fred Astaire, just to name a few. Even though this movie is an older one, the special effects and thrills are spectacular. Highly recommend.
Ooh, I've seen it a few times. It's a classic. We definitely have to cover it.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty safe bet that we will be touching that one pretty soon. Or not pretty soon, but eventually.
Yeah, for sure.
It's on the list.
Have you seen it, Pake?
I actually haven't. So that could be fun.
You're in for a treat. It's one I watch usually once a year. It's a classic movie.
Nice.
Like Jaws. It holds up.
Cool. And then we have one other little message from Greg. So I'll let you take that away.
All right. Well, this was actually about me. Thank you, Greg. It says, Daphne, the disdain and disbelief in your voice is hysterical. The sequel in space sounds like Jews in Space from the film History of the World Part 1. I have no intention of watching this, but listening to the coverage was awesome. Thanks, Greg.
That would be in reference to our coverage of Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
And talking about the sequel that doesn't exist, but kind of does in a weird context. I did end up watching Thanksgiving 3.
Ooh.
And the plot, it's like, I feel like, oh, I'll spoil it for you, but nobody cares about spoilers of Thanksgiving 3, I promise. So you're going to be okay. Yeah, like the plot of Thanksgiving 3 is Thanksgiving 2 was so bad that every single copy in existence was destroyed, except for one, and so Turkey has to hunt down that one copy of Thanksgiving 2 that still exists, so he can use it to brainwash the humanity into following his orders, or whatever. It's
nonsense.
It's a trip, yeah. And of course, yeah, Thanksgiving 2, the fake movie that doesn't exist, but is the plot point of the third one, in the movie, takes place completely in space.
Yeah, that's priceless.
Yeah.
Priceless. I have not seen Thanksgiving 3. I probably won't. I'll just trust your opinion.
You're not missing much at all.
Oh, boy. Wow.
And we have one voicemail about Love and Monsters from our good friend Steve. Of course we do. We always got to have a voicemail from Steve. It's never a proper podcast without it, right?
Of course not. We have to have a message from Steve. And so, without further ado, here's what Steve had to say about Love and Monsters.
I'm taking a radio, even though it doesn't have power. I'm taking it anyway. Hey, Pake and Daphne, it's Steve. This is for Love and Monsters. Is it strange that we're, I don't know, an hour into the movie? Yeah, I got an hour left, so we're 30 minutes into the movie. And my favorite character is the dog. I guess it's almost an hour in. Yeah, so halfway through. Okay, that hit me deep in the feels. The whole mom and dad. Whew, I've lost my parents, so, wow. I almost died a lot. I like that line. Was that Chris Hemsworth? It's gotta be, right? There's no other, like, Chris Hemsworth, right? Okay, I just checked IMDb. I guess it's not Chris Hemsworth. Sorry, Australia. That was really great. I'm watching the last little epilogue here, and I can't wait. I'm gonna watch it again eventually, but I wanted to send this in before you guys recorded because I know I'm getting real close to the deadline. So yeah, I love it. Good movie. Can't wait to hear you guys talk about it. Talk to you later.
Oh, Steve, awesome. Thank you so much for that. I do love how you just kind of run us through your emotions and through your times. And that's really cool. That, yeah, I love that you're able to share that the stuff you love, the stuff that's funny, and the stuff that does even like hit you emotionally on a deeper level too. That's really cool. I appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Steve. This movie, I think I can speak for Pake when I say that it definitely hit us in all the emotions and the feels at different times. And it really is one of those movies that I'm going to remember for a really long time.
It's great to get a new movie, and then even much greater than to have a really good new movie that I really enjoyed.
Yes. I hope it's the first of many that we get to cover. We've been delving so much into older movies, and to have something new, I think there's just this new energy and excitement around being able to see something that's fresh. Even though we weren't able to go to the theater came to us.
Yes.
And I think that makes it pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. And the dog was pretty great too. I agree, Steve.
Oh, yes. Boy, was fantastic.
Yes.
So glad he was in there. Such a great movie. Thanks everyone for sending in your feedback. We really appreciate it and hope that you will continue to send more. We like hearing from you as much as you want to send us a message. So
yeah. So it doesn't have to be about the movie we're covering that week, even though we do prefer that. It is nice to talk about the movie we're podcasting on. But yeah, if you haven't got a chance to see it, or if you got other thoughts about other movies we've covered, or even like Shenandoah did this week, and kind of give us maybe some thoughts on what we should cover. We always love hearing from you guys.
Absolutely, guys.
All right. Where else you can find me in the podcast universe? You can listen to Strange Indeed. We just wrapped up our coverage of Bly Manor, The Haunting of Bly Manor on Netflix. But we will be covering this next week. We'll stay on that Mike Flanagan kick, and we will be doing Doctor Sleep. We'll be talking about the sequel to The Shining.
Loved it.
I really loved it. It's dark. It's heavy.
Yes.
But it's great. And I haven't seen it since premiere night when it came out last year in theaters. So it'll be fun to revisit that one. And then after that, Strange Indeed will be moving into the new CBS All Access series, The Stand. And so I will not be covering that entire season on Strange Indeed. That will be Rima and Ben. But I will pop in for a handful of episodes when I want to. So it's an open door policy for me over on Strange Indeed. If I want to show up, I'm there.
All right. I love the original miniseries, so I'm excited, but also cautiously optimistic that this remake is going to be successful and fun.
Yeah.
There's a great cast involved, and I'm just hoping that all the pieces come together for it to be something pretty awesome.
Definitely. I'm looking forward to watching it. And then, of course, other friends, you can check out Panels to Pixels to hear Mark and Steve. They're wrapping up the coverage of The Boys Season 2. And then there's some rumors floating around that we might be getting a little roundtable discussion over just a tiny little movie that might happen to be my favorite movie of all time. So I might have to make an appearance over there. I'll be talking about some Scott Pilgrim versus the World at some point.
Oh, goodness.
So keep an eye on that podcast, or an ear, I guess.
You guys have to listen to that one because, yes,
Oh,
I saw the movie for the first time as part of a group movie watch, and it was pretty amazing to watch Pake and one of our other friends completely nerd out.
Yes. And then speaking of Mark, also his other podcast, Adrenaline Cinema, where they're talking, it's very similar to kind of this podcast, talking about different movies, but they're in the action movie realm. And this week, him and Wendy are talking Alien.
Oh, that is a classic as well. Such a great film.
Stealing our thunder. We could have done that one. I'm kidding.
No, you know what?
We still might. Yeah.
Yeah, we will do that one a bit later on.
Yeah.
We do have something coming up that will involve extraterrestrial beings.
Nice.
So that should be fun.
Awesome. Speaking of what's coming up next on Run for Your Lives, why don't you go ahead and give us a little tease on what is happening next week on Run for Your Lives?
Well, for the next 2 weeks, we are doing a Brad Payton double feature, basically. Up first is Rampage, which is the American science fiction monster film starring Dwayne Johnson that was released on April 13th, 2018. And the week after, we will be doing San Andreas, which is a 2015 disaster film, also directed by Brad Payton, also starring Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah, we'll do a Brad Payton, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson double feature over the 2 weeks.
Double
I love
feature.
it. I love it.
Yes. And our friend Ben will be joining us on that one, so it'll be a lot of fun.
Yes, I'm very excited. So if you have any thoughts about either of those movies or Love and Monsters, like I mentioned here, go ahead and submit any of those theories, feedback, thoughts to our Facebook page at facebook.com/runforyourlivespodcast. You can email us at runforyourlivespodcast@gmail.com. Hit us up on Twitter at RYFL Podcast or Instagram at Run for Your Lives Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please tell your friends, share the love. We are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, Audible, everywhere on YouTube. Find us, share it. And then if you don't want to do all that hunting yourself, you can always just go to runforyourlivespodcast.com, where you get links to all of our social media, all of our podcast players, YouTube channel, all of that right there. So it's the one-stop shop for everything you need, Run for Your Lives. And then when you go to Apple Podcasts, give us a review, give us 5 stars. We appreciate that as well.
Yes. Share the love, too, with your friends. It will help us get higher on the list so people can discover our fun podcast that we enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And with that, Pake, we have reached the end of the podcast.
Dun, dun, dun.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. We really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah.
I am Daphne.
And I'm Pate.
And if you have to run from giant centipedes, chumblers, or sand gobblers, you better run for your lives.
Bye-bye.